Hello and welcome to my workshop, well, the garage. So I'm going to be doing a piece here that is from a client who would like this blanket box painted in a black. Now I've done a furniture, some custom work for her before, a large dining setting way back years and years ago when I used to stock Miss Mustard Seeds milk paint, and I did it in the colour typewriter, which is not quite a true black. It's more of a charcoal black, so to speak, or a slate but black, you know, that kind of color. So I'm going to be showing you step by step how I clean this piece, prep it, ready for painting, and then we're going to be painting this in Artisan's chalk paint. So the chalk paint I'm going to be doing it in is their black called Noir. Now it is kind of just a little bit of a off black, not so quite a true black. Which is great because most chalk paints, milk paints, the blacks, because it's all natural pigments and that kind of thing, aren't that, you know, true black. It's nice charcoal black. Anyway, she also wants me to, and I'll take you for a closer look at some of the spots on here that we'll be going over, but this is a lock thing, and she has a lock for it that I've kept in here. But it's quite tarnished, and so she loves the tarnished look and doesn't so much like the shiny look. So we're going to be trying to do something to match that up. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet. Stay tuned. So here's a closer look. You can even see my reflection in the, in the brass. So yeah, you can see that's tarnished a little bit there, but see how much more the lock is tarnished. She likes that look, so we could even just be doing a little bit of scratching it up a bit, but I might even try some of my metallics paints to kind of get that similar look and feel. So what we're going to do, basically, I'll take you around here where the light is a little better, is we'll be cleaning this up a little bit. You probably can see some grunge and grime build up on some of those areas. Look at this, all needs a bit of cleaning. I may not remove, I could remove that too. She doesn't mind so much the colour of this being that, and that's not even a true black. This is more of like a gunmetal black. But yeah, this definitely, we're going to be removing these hardware, and she does not want the inside painted, and that's fair enough, that's fine. That does take about double the time to paint the inside of a piece, so when you're considering that. It's got a few little bits and stains over here, but it's all going to be painted black, and she does want a distressed look around the edges, so we'll be doing that. So the first step I've got a little bit of water in a bucket here, a cloth to clean the piece. Now you could use, I stock both of these products, Artisan's Easy Scrub, easy to scrub product, gets all the grease and grime off, and of course Fusion's TSP. So if you're in North America, you'll be able to get this. Artisan right here in Australia, both right here in Australia. And so we just need a tiny little scoop. I'm not even going to put a whole scoop because I haven't put, it's got the instructions exactly how much you need per litres. I know that the TSP is 1 capful for 500 mils of water. So we're just going to swish that around in there. Mix it all up, and I'm just going to use just an old cloth. And it's so easy, just wipe it all over. And you want to get into all the grooves, nooks and crannies. And what you're doing is just removing any grime build-up. And what I could have done before cleaning, although it's an easy touch-up job, is to remove all the screws from the hardware of this lock mechanism, and then you can clean behind that. So these happen to be quite old flathead screws, so we just have to, I'm just using my little screwdriver to unscrew them. But you just need to remove all of those. You can use a hand tool. It probably could even be quicker with a hand tool. There we go. Sometimes these move a little too fast, so I probably need to slow it down to a slower speed to get these screws out. Okay, so for this project, the customer would like me to paint it in Artisan's Chalk Finish called Noir. Now the difference between a chalk paint and a mineral paint is basically chalk paint is more chalky and has a porous finish, whereas mineral paints usually have a bit of a built-in top coat. So it's great to seal your chalk paints if you'd prefer them sealed. You'll be able to have a wipeable surface then, but it does does have a very matte finish. So here's the colour Noir right here. And it's not a true black, just that nice charcoal black. So we're going to be using that. Now the 1 litres come in these huge, but they do come in 500 mils, 600 mils I think, and 200 mils as well. So I've given it a really good shake all over. And so I'm just going to pour some into a jar. I pour enough to where I think that I'll need, but I think that is even too much for this one little piece. We'll see, hey? We'll see how I go with that much in this little jar. It's about half full, so I don't know how much that is. Maybe a half a cup or a third of a cup. And I'll just be using a Klingon F30. I just have a flat brush for a flat piece. You could use a wider one if I wanted to, but I think I'll just stick to this one for right now. And most of the time, I just dip my paintbrush. If you're first time painter, dip your paintbrush in. You don't need the paint to be very far up on the bristles. And I usually just wipe one edge and I leave all the paint on this other side. And we'll start at the top here. Why not? And I go off the edges like so, and then bring the brush back on. Nice long even strokes. With chalk paint though, it's also a little bit thicker, tends to be slightly thicker. And you can, it lends well to, if you do want brush strokes, to do a sort of a textured look. So it's fun for that as well. But we're just going to do a nice smooth look today. I'm not opening the lid just yet. I'm going to just do my painting with the lid closed. There is a slight gap in here and I'm just sort of painting in that. We'll see what it looks like once we open that lid. But this is just one coat and it has super good coverage. Now going off the edge like this means that my brush isn't going to be coming around the edge and leaving dribbles. You don't want drips around the edge there. So chalk paint and the mineral paint both dry fairly quickly, so you need to work fairly quickly with nice broad strokes along the grain of the wood. And then don't keep going over the same area more than a couple of times. All you're wanting to do is to just get those brush strokes nice and smooth. If you go over it too many times and it starts to dry, you'll end up feeling like it's just it's tacky or it's starting on your stroke. And so that's where you need to just leave it be, because you will create more brush strokes if your aim is not to have brush strokes, that is. I've just made a little splatter down here. I'm going to try not to get it on my table, but I don't really care if I do. It's a bit of a workhorse table. We're going to be distressing that edge, so I'm not too worried if there's paint on there or not, but I usually paint the whole piece and then sand back any distressing. I just had a piece of my table isn't clean. Had some dust and I picked it up, filling the edge. Now if I'm quick to move this, I can easily wipe that table also, and it'll come off within the next few minutes pretty easily. There's one coat on the front. you'll notice it's a little bit patchy in areas up here. It is starting to dry. You can see the light hitting different dry patches there. But that's okay because you'll still see a little bit of lightness. That's the colour of the wood showing through right here. And they are places where brush strokes have stopped and started again. As also over here, you can see that just there. It's a bit more noticeable actually on the camera than it is in real life. But that will all become nice and solid with our second coat. The first coat's always a little bit ugly. Here's the top here. Same technique, just long, strong brush strokes. Now, if you did feel like the paint was drying too quickly, or you feel like your brush is getting too stuck, you could use, you can use a bit of water, a water mister, and just either mist it onto your brush or onto your paint surface. Either way, and you'll see that your paint will slide and glide a lot smoother doing that. You don't want too much water though. And then that's all there is to the first coat. We just wait for that to dry. I usually give it a good couple of hours. Chalk paint does dry fairly quickly, but a good couple of hours. You can even leave it overnight if you want to. There's no harm in making it longer, but just make sure it's completely touch dry before you do your second coat, or sometimes that second coat can end up removing the first coat if you've done it too soon. So I'm just going to pop my brush in a plastic bag, clean up the mess, and if you just wrap that in a plastic bag, I'll show you what I use. Here's a handy trick for those of us who love to upcycle and recycle. So I've got these little bubble bags from your packaging, and I just cut the tops off them, the air all comes out, and they're just the perfect size for a paintbrush. So I love to just pop my brush in there, wrap it around, and it'll be good for the second coat. You can see it as it's starting to dry. This is only a couple of minutes. I've literally just finished painting the top. That's got patches, it's drying already, but there's wetter areas there, the darker areas are the wet areas. So it's got sort of a chalky finish, very chalky matte finish. And of course, again, you can see the wood through that. That's because it's the first coat. Second coat will be much cleaner. One thing I will point out that I noticed as it's dried, so it's completely dry now, this area here that still looks wet, I think that's a bit of an oil mark on there. And so I'm not too concerned about it because we're going to use a sealer to seal this. I could just use an oil-based sealer to seal it, but usually those will just disappear after we've sealed it. Okay, we're ready for round two. So I'm just going to, I did end up washing this jar out because the paint that was left in the bottom was very minimal, and so it had all dried around and was going to be crusty. So I washed that out. I've still got my wet brush from the first coat there. I'll probably just speed up this section because you don't need to watch me paint a second coat. Again, you saw how to do the painting part in the first bit. So the next step I want to take for this box, you can see it's completely dry. We've got 2 coats of Artisan's Noir Chalk Finish. And the next step I want to do is to distress the sides, edges, those wearing places, which is what the customer was wanting. So I do have Artisan's sanding prep pads here, and they come in a pack of 4 with 80, 120, 220 and 320 grit. So I'm probably going to use around about a 120 grit of these. Now they're reusable, you can rinse them off and they're good to go again. So I'll just zoom you in a little bit here and show you a bit of that distressing. So these sanding pads are great because they're flexible as well, so they do get around corners. I'll start with the 120. If I need a coarser grit, I'll go with that. If I need a finer grit, I'll go with that. But this seems to be distressing a little bit of those edges. You can really see the chalkiness here in that whiter, lighter color, which just wipes off. If I wiped that with water, for example, that would wipe off nicely. I'm going to just distress a bit of the edges, make it look aged and wearing. And of course that whiteness, or that chalkiness, you'll see that'll spread over here and make it a bit cloudy. We'll wipe all that down when I'm finished distressing. And when we seal it, you'll see how that true, this charcoal black will even be a deeper black than that. We just want to sand it till we see a little peak of the wood showing through. And I may even distress these parts here as I go. I can open up that top. I want to sand anything on the top edge, that any extra paint that might have slipped inside. I want to sand that off, and perhaps just a little bit on the edge as well. So right towards the end there, I took a softer sanding sponge with a less coarse grit, a finer grit, and went over the entire piece. So you can see it's really got that chalky look. So that's one of the main difference between a chalk paint or a chalk type finish and our mineral paints, which have a built-in top coat. So you will have a lot more of a chalky appearance, but I can just wipe that all back now. And then when I've finished wiping it back, when we go over it with the sealer, it will be a really nice, rich, dark charcoal black. Now I've wiped it all back, but again, it's going to still look chalky until we put our sealer on it or wet it down and get all that chalk off. But what I am loving, can you see the wood grain through the top here as I've sanded that back? So hopefully that will sort of show also when I put the sealer on it. See the nice knot in the, I think it's oak, beautiful oak. So I'm hoping that'll show up nicely when I put a sealer on. Okay, for this next part, I'm going to be tarnishing the brass that is part of the lock for the box, for the blanket box. Now the customer really likes the tarnishing that's on this lock itself, but notice how this is a lot shinier. So what I'm going to do first is I've Googled some things. Instead of using paint to try and do that, I thought let's try and do this naturally and create a natural tarnish. You just need some salt and any kind of vinegar. Now the person I saw was using apple cider vinegar. I happen to have that, but white vinegar is apparently great too. And you just need a sealed container. So I've just got a little fast food takeaway box. So what I want to do first is just use a bit of sandpaper to scratch up. I've done a little bit of scratching on here just to create some extra scratches, because I did notice on this lock here we've got some ready-made scratches already there. So I'm just going to do a little bit of that so we can get a bit of a match on that. Now I've got to figure out, this is going to be the underside and this is the side that will be mostly seen. So this is where the lock comes across here, and so that's where it will be seen. So we'll make sure we get that. It's got a little bit of tarnishing there, you can see. And the grit of sandpaper I'm using probably doesn't matter too much, but it's probably a 120, I think. A bit of tarnishing on, or scratching around there. We'll scratch this little part too. So we're just going to add a little bit of vinegar, a little bit of salt. Put the salt in, I'll just sprinkle that on the bottom. You don't need a whole lot, and you don't need to cover the whole lock either. So we're just going to be laying a bit of this. Sorry about the shadows. I've got the camera right in front of where the working space is. So I'm just adding a bit of vinegar to the salt. And we'll see how this works. Now, the videos I saw, the tutorials I saw, it looks like I may not need the paintbrush to stir that around. Yeah, I can smell it. You can see how much I've got there. If you want it to sort of sit in it, I might just go with this bit first and this bit here as well. But they say you need the air that's in there to, oh look, now this is probably not the best container because it doesn't have a proper seal in it. Apparently there's going to be some kind of chemical reaction we'll see what happens. Okay, some follow-up important information. The video that I rewatched again just to make sure I got it right was saying that you don't want to submerge the article in the vinegar. I don't mind me using my hands. You just want to have it in there where the air is kind of getting to all of the pieces. So I might just put it on its side for a minute, come back. That's been probably about half an hour so far. You saw some little bits of pinkish tinge in there. We'll see how we go in an hour. Okay, while I'm waiting for the lock to tarnish, for that process to happen, I'm going to be using Artisan's clear wax. Now it comes in a 100ml or a 250ml can, and it just smells delicious. It smells like French pear, so it's beautiful while you're working on it. I'm just going to be using my large workshop size tub. And I want to show you how this chalk finish is going to come up so beautifully in with the wax. So we will start at the bottom here, and you'll see the wood really shines through too. So we just apply the wax with a wax brush. You can just use any wax brush. Any natural bristle brushes are great for waxing. I do have several of those available in my online shop. So that has gotten that whole bottom section there. Add a little bit more, we can make it go. We've still got some on the bristles. So you wipe it, you are applying the wax, and then you're going to wipe it back and buff it off after a few minutes. So we might just go ahead and finish the rest of it, and then by that time this should have, I'm just adding it really sparingly over the entire piece. You don't want to be wasteful of the wax, it really does go a long way. But by the time we get to this top section, this will be dry enough to where we can just buff it. I'm going to do all over here as well. And I just love doing waxes as a finish over the top of milk paint or chalk type paints. Just gives a lovely professional finish. You can also use waxes over the top of our mineral paints as well, but they do have their built-in top coat, so I don't usually bother. You can see the difference already with the chalky finish. the sealer. And so even if I did a different type of sealer, it would still be a difference in the dark to light. So always remember that when you're using chalk type finishes, it will be a different finish than the color. It'll be a different color than what you started with or what the paint dries to. Okay, so we've applied all our wax on there, all over. And then I'm just going to take my cloth, just make sure it's a lint-free cloth, and starting down here, wipe it back, and then just give it a good scuff so you can change your cloth around to where there's no wax there anymore, and you're just buffing it back and forth till it creates a beautiful sheen. So we'll just wipe that all back. As you're wiping it back, it's sort of also, yeah, I said lint free, and now I've just gone and left some lint from this cloth on the screws. It's pulled it off. Just make sure the lint doesn't stick to your wax. I think that's actually a little, oh, now we've got a little chip of paint there. Huh, must have been a blob that got stuck on there. And now it didn't sand back in my sanding state. It's a bit of an issue. Might have to touch that up. So then we find another clean space of the cloth. I'm going to do this back and forth buffing motion. Still is a bit wobbly, so you're hearing all the clanging from the handles rattling. And we've got a beautiful sheen. Lift you up to the top, the chalky finish still there, and the nice sheen from the waxed finish. You can see the oak of the wood showing through on those distressed edges. Okay, here's the last bit to wax, is this top, so we're going to have a look at that. Beautiful oak grain that's just peeking through, and I think it's really just the raised areas of the grain where the paint's gone in between the little grooves. So you're just going to be buffing back and forth, and you shouldn't feel any drag, you shouldn't feel any tackiness. It should be just beautiful and smooth to the touch. And then, of course, wax has a curing time, just like our paints do. And I would leave about 21 to 30 days, depending on humidity, to just let all of the moisture evaporate from the wax. It'll be touch dry, and you'll want to probably place things on top of it, but just try not to place anything heavy on top of the chest for 21 to 30 days, and that allows for that curing time, hardening of the wax. There's a little bit of a sheen on there now, and you can still see a little bit of that grain of the wood showing through the painted surface and the wax surface. So I think it'll be lovely. Okay, I'm coming back to our brassy looking lock here, and this is the look we were sort of going for. Bit of tarnishing. I've left this in here for way more than 6 hours. Overnight, actually. This was the brassy looking of that, but this almost looks now like it's copper, and look at the really pretty patina and oxidation that's happening on here. It's so, I like it. Not quite the look we were going for, so we might have to try some other things. And that's just the fumes of the vinegar and salt Look how coppery that looks compared to the brass look. The orange, yellow, gold. Quite coppery. So that's oxidation. Quite tarnished. It's sort of not the right look. So I'm going to dry that off now. So I've got some vinegar solution on that. Let's dry this off now. See if we can come up with a different plan. And as you can see, we tried the tarnishing to do that naturally, and it has tarnished it quite a lot, but it doesn't look like this. So we need to kind of match these metallics. And so I've done a little bit of practicing on the back here. Still looks a little bit tarnished, but a little bit brighter than the front. So we've got a bit of gold here, we've got some brown, we've got some little oxidization of the copper. I'll check in with the client and see if she's happy with me just going ahead and doing something like this. So then we can match it all over and create this with this look using some paints. So I've got here some Rub and Buff, European Gold Rub and Buff, and I've also got some antique bronze, which kind of gives it a little bit more of that bronzy look. Okay, so I'll just start on this, just trying to cover up everything using a little bit of Rub and Buff. This is European Gold. They come in a range of different metallic shades, but Rub and Buff, just, you only need the very tiniest bit on the tip of your paintbrush and it spreads a long way. So why don't we start with this small thing here. You can see I'm just sort of going over that in all of the screw holes and everywhere. And I want some of that tarnishy or the texture to show through, but if it doesn't, we'll sort of just create texture. So just going over everywhere, every surface with that Rub and Buff. So the back of your locks, this is going to be sitting right against the box. I've done a little bit of a practice area there, so you can use that back areas for practicing on the look that you're going for. So we'll just add a little bit more now. You can still see a little bit of copper tone here, but you can see definitely different than over here. Now the Rub and Buff is a bit of a oil-based, waxy kind of a medium. So it's not water-based, so it won't come off with water. But usually I'll use my fingers to just rub this on, and it rubs on really nicely using your fingers also. But we'll see how that shows up. We can add little bits if we need to. It dries super fast. Not quite the same color, but we're going to be adding and layering that. Let's try that on here. Again, we've done some practice on the back. So you can still see a little bit of texture through that. Still a bit too gold. We want it a little bit more bronzy color, but we're going to add some antique bronze in the Artisan metallic range to see if we can make it a little closer. So using this as a bit of a base, you can see some shiny bits through there. But then also, if this isn't quite a match in the end, like this is what we ended up with. So I will be repeating this then over on the other side. So we're not trying to match it exactly. We just want these two items to match because they're going with each other. So now we're getting that to a little bit more of a uniform look. You know, we can see some texture in there. That's the kind of look we're going for, to see a little bit of texture. But we will let that dry. It's pretty much touch dry as soon as you've finished putting it on. It's not coming off on my fingers. And making sure when you close the hinge that you've got all the little bits and creases. And use a brush with the rub and buff. If you're going to use a brush, you can use your fingers. Make sure you use one that you don't care to use again. It does come out with turpentine, or I think it's isopropyl alcohol or one of those cleaners. There we go. And that's going to close over the top like this, and then the lock sits inside here like so. So this is the look we're going for. We'll now go ahead and do the front so we can make it all look similar. Okay, so I've put this on everywhere, and then I've started to go over with antique bronze just in little patches. I've done this lock, but I need to try and match up this to make it a little bit more grungy, like so. These ones are kind of matching. So I'm just using Artisan's Antique Bronze. And we are, whoop, the brush is all dried. Okay, we're just going to sort of blotch it on in patches. Sort of blotching it on in areas, just experimenting with it. It's a water-based paint, so it can just wipe off if I'm not happy with it. Here's a bit that won't be seen, so we could have probably experimented with that a little. And then I'm just going to roughly patch this up, blot it up rather, make it a little bit darker. It's getting a little darker. Bit of an artist impression.